It's 4 p.m. on Monday, April 21st here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon. It's been 127 hours or more than 5 days since a nearly 7,000-ton Sewol ferry sank into waters with more than 470 people on board. Now, 64 have been confirmed dead so far. Nearly 240 remain unaccounted for. Search and rescue operations have continued for the last 5 days, particularly in high gear overnight, with little results, however, as no survivors have been found since. But down in Jindo, it's been more than 5 full days since Korea's worst ferry disaster in 2 decades, with search and rescue operations continuing through the days and nights. Now, unfortunately, like I mentioned, no survivors have been found, and the death toll just continues to rise. Let's go live to our Hwang and Myung-kil, who are standing by at Paengmok-hang Harbor, which is just 20 kilometers from the accident scene. Sung-hee, what's the latest from where you are?
The rescue team have continued their efforts to enter the 3rd floor of the ship since about noon today, but no word yet on whether that was a success. They have been focusing their search on the 3rd and 4th floors of the vessel. Now, the 3rd floor is where the vessel's cafeteria is located, and the 4th floor is where the cabins are. And these places are where the high school students, most of the high school students, are believed to have been at the time of the accident. Nearly 240 people are still missing in the sunken Sewol ferry, and nearly 90% of those are from Danon High School in Ansan. Now, the divers are working around the clock, and in addition to the 5 guide ropes that have been attached to the sunken vessel, they added 1 more, securing another route to the inside of the ferry.
That's right, the rescue team is leaving no options out on the rescue operations. More than 200 Coast Guard ships and Navy vessels, 13 fishing boats and 35 aircraft and more than 500 divers are deployed today. Foreign countries are also lending help. Technical experts from the U.S. and Netherlands are at the accident site to lend support to the ongoing rescue operations. 2 remotely controlled submersibles are searching inside the sunken ferry with the help of 2 U.S. experts. The Korea Coast Guard has asked Japan to cooperate in sending over officials from the company that manufactured the Sewol vessel. The Coast Guard has also asked China to send 2 barges and 2 cranes. But despite the ongoing rescue operations, there has been no news of any survivors.
That's right, no news of any survivors, but unfortunately the death toll has risen again to 64 after officials located 6 more female bodies today. The identities of these bodies have been confirmed through DNA testing. The bodies were found on the 4th floor of the vessel, which, like I said earlier, was where the cabins of the students were. The number of survivors remains unchanged at 174, but it does seem that the weather conditions have taken a turn for the better.
Yes, that's true. The weather conditions at the accident site worked in favor this Monday, with clear skies and tidal waves reaching 1 meter level. This has been Myung-kil and Hwang reporting live from Paengmok-hang Harbor.
Now let's try getting a better sense of the situation down in Jindo, the progress made by the search and rescue team off Korea's southwestern coast, and what could be done to speed up operations there. For that, Bruce Reed joins us live via Skype from the United Kingdom. He is a chief executive officer at the International Maritime Rescue Federation. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with the search and rescue operations here in Korea that's now in its 6th day. Now, your assessment of the quality and scale of the operations in terms of progress.
Good morning and thank you, and condolences to everyone involved in this tragic event. Looking from afar, it's quite difficult to see what's actually happening at this stage, but what we've seen from the rescue responses from the start has been very good. It's been well coordinated. These types of events, mass rescue operations, by the very nature of so many people in the water and missing, means it puts great strain on the resources and the ability to respond. What we've seen is a coordinated response. It looks like they are working very, very well together. What they have now is a massive challenge, though, because very unlikely that there will be any more survivors. So it really is a matter of recovering the bodies of those that are still missing, so they can bring them back to the loved ones. The big challenge will still be on shore as they try and establish who is missing and who has been saved. And of course, Now they're into the diving and the salvage. They have to manage the risk around those rescuers that are expected to go in and to try and recover those bodies on the vessel.
Bruce, it's been over 127 hours, more than 5 days since this accident. Now, according to standards followed by your organization, what kinds of operations would you be carrying out at this point?
You see, this is where the big challenge is, because mass rescue operations such as this don't happen very often. What we tend to be working on is to ensure that the states and the rescue organisations are well prepared in advance so they can respond. And South Korea Coast Guard actually attended one of our mass rescue workshops in Hong Kong this time last year. So we know that they've been quite focused on this and have good plans in place. What they will be doing now, though, is making sure that they're doing everything they possibly can to bring the bodies of those that have been lost in this tragedy back to their loved ones.
All right, there is a lot of talk about what should have been done by the captain and crew at the time of the sinking, that actions taken immediately after the ship capsized could have saved more lives, many more. We're talking about a 6,800-ton vessel with more than 470 people on board. What kind of safety and evacuation measures are usually taken to save passengers on such a humongous ferry?
Yeah, so that's probably outside of our scope. We really deal more with the search and rescue aspect. So once the people are in the water and the recovery side of it, I think there'll be quite intensive investigation. We've already seen the authorities act swiftly to start to establish what's actually happened here. What we would be interested in an international basis is what are the things that are found in that investigation, and are some of those aspects able to be transported into other organisations so that we can prevent this type of event occurring in the future.
All right, Bruce Reid, Chief Executive Officer at UK-based International Maritime Rescue Federation, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Okay, thank you.
Meanwhile, President Park Geun-hye has vowed to hold those involved in the ferry sinking strictly responsible, pointing an accusing finger at the crew's irrational and irresponsible actions when the Sewol-ho got into trouble. Now, for more, let's go live to ARIRANG News Song Ji-san. She joins me from the news center. Ji-san, fill us in on the latest.
Gyeongyang President Park said what the captain of the Sewol ferry did was equivalent to murder, and the same goes for the crew that abandoned the ship before the passengers. At a meeting of senior secretaries at the presidential office of Cheongwada this Monday morning, she also said she felt a deep distrust of the government and anger from the affected family members because of the way government officials handled the case in the beginning. The president ordered the joint investigation team composed of the police and the prosecution to thoroughly clarify any suspicions the public might have regarding this tragic accident.
Now, Ji-sun, speaking of suspicions, it's not just the family members who want to know why and how the crew members escaped from the ferry when they knew some of the passengers or most of the passengers were trapped inside the cabins.
Right, the joint investigation team early in the day received arrest warrants for 4 additional crew members. This comes after 3 crew members, including the captain, were arrested over the weekend. We're also getting reports that the Sewol ferry, built 20 years ago in Japan, underwent a month of renovation to extend its sailing life by more than 7 years. Some 20 people related to the renovation have been summoned for questioning as well. An investigation ongoing into the ferry operator Cheonghaejin Marine Company as well. The special investigative team has imposed travel bans on the company's president, the former chairman of its parent firm, and his 2 sons who are the biggest shareholders of the company. Cheonghaejin Marine Company has stopped all operations and is no longer holding briefings for the press at its headquarters. In the meantime, one of the engineers of the ferry that was questioned by investigators attempted to hang himself. His colleagues found him just before he could go through it. The person has been transferred to a nearby hospital and is reportedly in stable condition.
Right, this is really a national disaster in many aspects. Now, Ji-sun, the government declared Ansan in Gyeonggi-do Province, that's where Danwon High School is, and Jindogun County in Jeollanam-do Province, where the accident happened, as special disaster zones. Now, what does that mean?
Yes, at around 6:40 p.m. Sunday evening, those 2 areas officially became special disaster zones. Jindogun County is where the nearest harbor close to the sunken ferry is, and the Tanwon High School, an entire second grade and faculty of around 350 people were on board the sunken Seoul ferry is at Ansan city of Gyeonggi-do province near the capital, Seoul. Now, those two areas will quickly receive state funds for the search and rescue operation, and local taxes, including acquisition taxes, will be waived. Other general taxes will either be reduced or the payment deadline will be postponed for up to 9 months. And financial assistance will be given to the families of the victims as well as those who are still waiting for their beloved ones to return. Back to you, Kan-young.
All right, Ji-sun, thank you for that. That was our Sung Ji-sun reporting live on government measures to the victim survivors and the captain and crew responsible for this ferry capsize, perhaps. Now, like we mentioned, President Park Geun-hye has spoken out in no uncertain terms about the captain and crew of the sunken Seoul ferry, saying their actions on the day the ship capsized were akin to murder. She also had something to say about public officials who have been criticized for rescue operations. Here's our Yoo-Rian.
선장과 일부 승무원들의 행위는 상식적으로 도저히 납득할 수 없고 용납될 수 없는 살인과도 같은 행태였습니다.
Likening the act to murder, President Park Geun-hye criticized the actions taken by the captain and his crew at the time of the accident during a meeting with senior secretaries on Monday. A communications log had revealed that the captain and crew members of the Seoul ferry had called on passengers to stay where they were during the time of the accident. President Park vowed to make sure justice is handed down.
저는 반드시 단계별로 철저하게 규명해서 무책임과 부조리, 잘못된 부분에 대해서는 강력히 책임을 물을 것입니다.
The captain and 2 other crew members are now charged with negligence of duty and violation of maritime law. President Park also had pointed words for public officials, some of whom have been facing criticism for inadequate efforts in rescue operations. During the days following the accident, families of the victims grew furious at the government-related personnel and also the Coast Guard for making conflicting announcements on the number of victims and survivors. The families also expressed frustration that the numbers of rescue personnel dispatched to the site and the numbers announced by the government did not match up. Yoo-Rian, ARIRANG News.
So the captain and crew of the Seoul ferry would not be able to evade the law and will rightfully be tried under Korea's criminal law. But what about international maritime law? What's the global standard in terms of duty on the captain and crew's part, and what kind of punishment would they receive? We have a legal expert live on the line, Dr. Hwang, a U.S. lawyer and professor of law at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Dr. Hwang, thank you so much for joining us. Now, first of all, what does the international maritime law say about the responsibility and the duty of the captain and crew in time of its ship capsize?
A couple of factors. Good afternoon, Ms. Moon. This terrible tragedy. There are a couple of things from the international law that is applicable. One is that the customary international law has something called the principles of prudent seamanship, which means that captains are supposed to care for the safety of crew and passengers. In this case, it's kind of hard to see how Captain Lee actually acted to care for the safety of his passengers. On the other hand, Korea is also a signatory of an international treaty called the Safety of Life at Sea. And under that treaty, the Seoul was supposed to have an emergency plan, which the captain should have implemented. And again, given the facts that have come out so far, it's quite hard to see how the captain really fulfilled his duty.
Now, you mentioned the emergency plan that was required for the captain and crew to follow. Now, what are the factors of that emergency plan?
That's where the Korea maritime law will actually kick in. The Korea maritime law has various safety guidelines, and we actually haven't seen from the news reports what kind of the emergency plan that Seoul had specifically, but they were supposed to have one, and they were supposed to follow that plan, but, based on various reports, it seems that the captain and the crew followed no such guidelines.
No, I think it's been internationally, globally consensus, or it's a consensus that the captain needed to have stayed with the ship until all passengers he saw were rescued, but obviously he didn't. He was one of the first ones to be rescued off that boat. Now, how would the captain and the crew be held responsible, or what kind of a punishment would they receive according to international maritime law?
Well, legally speaking, there's actually very little duty to require a captain to stay behind until all the passengers are evacuated. I mean, of course, there's a very long tradition of captains who have stayed back to make sure that all the crews and the passengers are evacuated, and some captains have lost their lives. And certainly, if any captains who have commanded their own vessels from around the world and seen Captain Lee's behavior, it is certainly morally and ethically reprehensible. On the other hand, from the customary international law, it is a little difficult to hold a captain responsible for such behavior. Now, closest counterpart might be Italy's Concordia case from 2 years ago, but again, that case was application of the Italian criminal code, and for which in this case we'll also see Korean criminal code in action as well.
Right, so are you saying that the captain, the crew of the Sewol ferry will be tried based on the Korean maritime law as well as the international maritime law?
I don't think we'll actually have to reach the international law, because international law in itself doesn't really specify what kind of criminal penalties that captains and the crews have. So the actual criminal provisions will actually come from the relevant Korean statutes.
All right, Dr. Hwang Jung-mook, U.S. lawyer and professor of law at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies, thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you.
어서 돌아와 보고 싶어. 사랑해, 얘들아.
Now, the parents of the missing are now into a 6th day of waiting for any news of their loved ones who were on board the ill-fated ferry. Of course, they are growing increasingly angry as details continue to emerge about the sinking and the failing rescue operations. The families have been huddled in an auditorium near the accident site in Chindo, and that is where our Hwang Ji-hye joins us live. Ji-hye, it must be a distressful situation there for these families.
Of course, and just about an hour ago, a briefing took place right here at the Chindo Auditorium, explaining families about the progress that Coast Guard and military have made so far in rescue operations. The representative of the families told others that he asked authorities to wrap up search and rescue operations by this Thursday. He said the authorities pledged to do their best to meet the deadline. Over complaints from the families that the oil spill is damaging bodies, the representative said that using chemical products to stop the oil spill could lead to even worse conditions when it comes to preserving the bodies still trapped in the water. He went on to say the first priority is on rescue operations. The families are now expected to head to the waters on boats to go to where rescue operations are underway to see what's going on with their own eyes, while many lined up, only around 15 is expected to get on board.
Now, Ji-hye, I couldn't begin to imagine how the families, the kind of emotions the families are dealing with. How are they dealing with the grief? I mean, many are concerned about their physical as well as mental health going through this very harrowing time.
Some have fainted while many are barely eating or sleeping, and with no news updates about survivors, hopes are really falling for these people, for these families waiting for their missing loved ones to return back to them. Medical personnel are on 24-hour standby in what is a very agonizing situation. Many of the families have been staying here, actually living here basically since last Wednesday. They look very, very exhausted. I had a chance to talk with the families waiting for the missing, and they could barely speak. As I started the conversation, they were overcome with emotion. This was Hwang reporting live from Jindo Auditorium.
Now, bodies that are first transferred to Mokpo Hanguk Hospital down in Jeollanam province near the accident site are identified, and then after they're released, they are sent to families in Ansan, because most of these missing here, more than 300 of the 400 and more than 470 passengers on board this Seoul ferry, they were high school students of a single high school in Ansan on a field trip. And now we go live to our Connie Kim, who is standing by at the Korea University Ansan Hospital, where many of the fallen have arrived. What is the latest, Connie?
Hi, Gonyang. I'm currently standing by at the funeral hall of Korea University Ansan Hospital. Now, this is where 6 of the bodies delivered from Mokpo are still lying here, and 4 of them are expected to be released tomorrow morning. Now, starting from Wednesday, a joint memorial hall is expected to be established for the Tanon High School students at Ansan Olympic Museum. Now, high school students that have passed will be Parents of the deceased have delayed releasing their children after requesting an autopsy to find out the direct cause of death. They want to know whether their children died from drowning or from hypothermia after waiting inside an air pocket in the vessel. Now, this is critical in determining whether the government was fast enough with their rescue operations, and parents say they'll hold the government responsible if this was not the case. The bodies of 8 victims from this tragedy were released to their families today, and the city of Ansan continues to grieve for those it has lost so suddenly and so tragically.
Right, Connie, it has to be a traumatic time for everyone there. How about the students who survived this horrible ordeal? How are they holding up?
Yes, currently there are 81 patients being treated in this hospital with medical treatment. Now, according to the director of this hospital, he said many of the students that have suffered from mental stress and depression have improved since they first arrived. However, he said they would continue to monitor the students, that 1 out of 4 students are not sleeping well, and that about 20% of them will need psychological therapy. After monitoring their status, the hospital will decide whether students can return to their daily lives within the next 3 days or so. A team composed of experts from the welfare and education ministries, the city of Ansan, and Gyeonggi-do province will continue to look after them. This was Connie Kim reporting live from Korea University Ansan Hospital.
Right, thank you, Connie. All of the victims are going to need our full support in what will be a very difficult road ahead of them. That was our Connie Kim reporting live from Korea University Ansan Hospital, where many of the victims from the Seoul ferry disaster are being treated. Now, the weather has been playing a big role in the search and rescue operations down in Korea's southwestern coast of Jindo and at the Paengmok-hang Harbor. And we'd like to find out what the weather is like there, whether it will be favorable for these search and rescue efforts or whether it'll be a hindrance. For the latest, let's go over to our Michelle Park. Michelle.
Well, the weather seems to be cooperating with the search and rescue efforts off the southwestern coast. And although it is still a bit windy, the tides are calm. Now, the sky is looking very clear with a visibility of up to 14 kilometers, and that will extend even further throughout the day, with the highs reaching up to 16 degrees. Now, as for the tidal currents, they are slowing in the areas, and they'll slow down even further at 6:40 this evening, giving the rescuers an easier time as they search the Seoul vessels. Now, the current temperature of the water in Jindo is at 11.7 degrees Celsius, with the winds blowing at 3.6 meters per second, which is down from the morning, and the height of the wave is at 0.6 meters, which is half of what we had from yesterday. Well, that's all I have at this moment. Back to you, Kanyang.
Thank you, Michelle, for that. And that is all from me at this hour. Let me give you a quick wrap-up of the situation from the Seoul ferry disaster, which capsized Wednesday, and that is about 5 days ago. It's been more than 127 hours since the accident. 64 have been confirmed dead from that accident, 174 rescued, but 238 are still unaccounted for. Of course, families of these victims, of the hopefully survivors and the missing, they remain at an auditorium nearby Jindo waiting for news from their loved ones. But experts are saying the realistically hope is diminishing by the minute. We'll have more on this extensive coverage of Korea's ferry disaster right here in ARIRANG. Join us again at the top of the hour.